We found a wooden doll sitting on a stump, carved to look exactly like us. At first I thought it was a joke. The stump sat in the center of a small clearing where the pines thinned just enough for gray afternoon light to reach the ground. Damp needles carpeted the forest floor. Sap hung thick in the air, sweet and sticky, mixing with the sour smell of wet bark. The doll sat upright on the stump like it had been placed carefully, facing the direction we'd come from. It was about the length of my forearm. Two figures carved from the same piece of wood. One taller, one slightly shorter. Me and Alex. For a long moment neither of us said anything. Wind moved through the canopy, and the branches creaked together overhead like old bones shifting. "Okay," Alex said finally. "That's weird." We stepped closer. The carving was crude but unmistakable. My crooked nose was there, the dent in Alex's chin. Even the little frayed cord of my backpack had been etched along the shoulder of the figure. The wood still smelled fresh. Pine sap glistened in thin amber beads where the knife marks were deepest. "Someone's messing with us," Alex said, but his voice had dropped. The forest around us felt too quiet. No birds, no insects, just the slow, patient creaking of trees rubbing together somewhere above. I picked the doll up. It was heavier than I expected, warm from the weak sunlight. Up close, the carving was even more unsettling. The faces weren't smiling or neutral. They looked strained, like they were trying to hold a shape they didn't fully understand. "Did you make this?" Alex asked. I snorted. "With what?" "My invisible carving knife. Maybe someone's camping out here." I turned slowly, scanning the trees. The forest stretched in every direction. Trunks packed close together, bark dark with moisture. The deeper woods swallowed the light so completely it felt like staring into a wall. "No footprints," I said. The clearing soil was soft. If someone had been here recently, we would have seen it. There were only our tracks. And the stump. Alex took the doll from me. "Man," he muttered, turning it over. "Look at this." The back had been carved too. Lines etched down the spine of each tiny figure. Not decorative lines. Names. Mine. His. Except the last letters trailed off into rough gouges like whoever carved them had lost control of the knife. A breeze slipped through the clearing. The branches overhead shifted. For a moment the forest sounded like it was whispering. Alex shoved the doll into the side pocket of his pack. "Souvenir," he said. Something in my chest tightened. "Maybe we shouldn't take it." "Why not?" I didn't have a good answer. Just a feeling, like we had interrupted something. We kept hiking. The trail wasn't really a trail anymore. Just a faint gap between the trees we'd been following since morning. Our boots sank into damp moss. Fallen branches cracked underfoot. Every now and then I caught the scent of sap again. Stronger than before. Sharp, fresh, like something nearby had just been cut. "Do you hear that?" I said. Alex stopped. We both listened. For a second there was nothing. Then, faint creaking. Not branches moving in wind. Something slower, like wood bending under weight. Alex frowned. Probably a tree shifting. But it followed us. Not close, just somewhere behind the trees. Creak. Pause. Creak. We picked up our pace. The forest thickened as we walked. The canopy blocked more of the sky, turning the air dim and green. After 10 minutes Alex stopped again. "Hold on." He pulled the doll from his pack. I felt my stomach drop immediately. It had changed. The two carved figures were standing closer together now. Before, there had been a clear gap between them. Now their shoulders touched. "Did you move it?" I asked. "No." The faces looked different too. More defined, less strained, almost calm. The gouged names on the back had deepened, like the wood had been carved further. Neither of us said anything for a while. Then Alex shoved it back into his pack again. "Okay," he said. "That's officially creepy." We started walking faster. The creaking sound returned almost immediately. Creak. Pause. Creak. Except now, it wasn't behind us anymore. It was somewhere to the side. Moving. Keeping pace. The trees around us seemed closer together. Branches brushed my shoulders. Sap clung to my sleeve when I pushed past a trunk. The forest smelled stronger now. Resinous. Wet. Alive. Dude, Alex said suddenly. I turned. He was staring ahead. At another clearing. Smaller this time. At its center, another stump. My throat went dry. Something sat on it. Another doll. Same size. Same shape. We approached slowly. This one was carved from darker wood. But the figures were still us. Except now, there were 3 of them. The third figure stood between the first 2. His face wasn't fully carved yet. Just rough gouges where eyes would be. Alex whispered, "What the hell?" The creaking sound surrounded us now. All around the clearing. Tree trunks bending. Wood shifting. Like the forest itself was breathing. I turned in a slow circle. And that's when I noticed the trees. Faces. Dozens of them. Half carved into bark. Some shallow. Some deep. Expressions frozen mid-formation. Eyes that weren't quite eyes. Mouths that weren't quite mouths. Like the forest had been practicing. Learning. Alex pulled the first doll from his pack again. We stared at it. The 2 figures had changed. Their faces were perfectly carved now. Perfectly calm. But the bodies, they were hollow. Thin gouges had appeared across their chests. As if something had been scooped out. Behind us, a tree trunk creaked louder than the rest. We turned. The bark split slightly along one of the carved faces. And something moved inside. Wood shifting. Sap dripping like slow blood. I grabbed Alex's arm. "We need to go." We ran. Branches whipped our faces. Roots grabbed at our boots. The creaking followed us everywhere now. Dozens of trees bending. Watching. The forest smelled overwhelmingly of fresh-cut wood. Alex stumbled once, caught himself. "Is it still in the pack?" I shouted. He yanked the doll out while running. I looked back at it, and my blood turned cold. There were no longer 2 figures carved into it. Only one. The second shape had been hollowed out completely. Alex stopped. "Where?" That's when we both realized. The forest behind us had gone quiet. No creaking. No wind. No whispers. Just stillness. Alex turned slowly. I followed his gaze. Back down the path we'd run. The trees there stood perfectly still. Except for one stump at the edge of the trail. Something sat on it. A wooden doll. 2 figures carved into it. One looked like Alex. The other was me, standing perfectly still beside him. Alex looked down at the doll in his hand again. Only one figure remained. His, and somewhere deeper in the woods. A tree creaked. Slow. Patient. Like something learning how to stand. Something walked beside us. Invisible except for the grass bending under its steps. At first we thought it was wind. The clearing we'd stepped into was narrow and uneven. A ribbon of knee-high grass cutting between thick walls of spruce and cedar. The late afternoon light filtered down through broken gaps in the canopy, turning the grass silver where it moved. And it was moving. Not everywhere. Just in a line. The stalks bent slowly, one after another, as if something heavy was walking through them. Right beside us. I stopped walking. So did Ben. The bending stopped too. The clearing went still. Wind whispered faintly in the trees, but the grass remained upright again, trembling in place like it had just remembered its shape. Ben squinted at it. "You see that?" "Yeah. Probably a deer." I nodded, though the explanation didn't settle right in my chest. A deer would have shown something. An ear flicking above the grass, the sway of a body. But there was nothing. Just empty air. We started walking again, following the faint trail cutting through the clearing. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then the grass bent again. Step, 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 perfectly in rhythm with us. I stopped abruptly. The movement beside me stopped too. A faint creak rolled through the forest behind us. Branches rubbing together somewhere high above. Ben shifted his pack. "Okay. That's weird." He stepped forward deliberately. One step. The grass beside him bent. One step, another patch folded down under invisible weight. We both watched in silence. The path it made through the grass was too narrow for a deer, too measured, like something trying to match us. "Fox," Ben said, though he didn't sound convinced. I crouched, brushing my hand through the bent stalks. The grass was damp with the coolness that settles in shaded places. When I pressed my palm into the earth beneath, the soil was soft and dark, fresh. Something had just stepped there. But there was no print. We stood again. "Maybe it's just the ground shifting," I said. Even as I said it, the explanation sounded thin. We kept moving. The grass continued bending beside us, step for step. The sound of our boots on the trail mixed with something quieter. A soft brushing noise through the grass that arrived half a heartbeat after each of our steps. The forest smelled thick and earthy, damp soil and moss and the faint sweetness of sap leaking from somewhere nearby. Overhead, the canopy shifted with slow groans of wood. Felt like the woods were listening. After a few minutes, Ben tried something. He stopped suddenly and jumped sideways into the grass. The bending line froze where it was. Then, slowly, carefully, another patch folded down 2 feet closer to him. Ben let out a nervous laugh. "Okay," he said. "That's not wind." We watched. The grass bent again. A single step, then another. Whatever it was had adjusted its path to stay beside him. I felt something cold slide down my spine. "Let's keep moving," I said. We left the clearing and entered thicker forest. The ground here was darker, carpeted with ferns and moss instead of grass. For a moment I thought we'd lost it. Then the ferns beside the trail flattened. One frond after another pressed down as if a boot heel had landed on them. Except there was no boot. Ben stared at the ferns. "Do you hear that?" I listened. Our footsteps, the creak of branches overhead, and something else. Another set of steps. Not quite audible, more felt than heard. The soft compressing sound of vegetation bending under weight. Always half a beat behind us. Like someone walking slightly out of sync. We started walking faster. The unseen steps sped up too. Fern, fern, fern. Each one pressed flat in a careful line. Ben muttered, "Maybe it's, I don't know, pressure in the ground or something." But the path of bending plants curved around rocks. It stepped over fallen branches. Corrected itself when we veered. It was following us. The deeper we went, the quieter the forest became. No birds, no insects, just the low creaking of trees swaying together in the dim green light. The air smelled stronger now, wet bark, sap, and the faint rot of old leaves breaking down into soil. Ben suddenly stopped again. So did the bending. The last fern flattened slowly, like a foot lifting away. We both stared at it. Then Ben turned to me. "What if it's copying us? Copying, watching how we move." I looked back down the trail behind us. Nothing but dark trunks and tangled undergrowth. Then I had a thought. "Walk backward," I said. Ben frowned. "Why?" "Just do it." He shrugged and turned around, stepping carefully backward along the trail. For a moment nothing happened. Then the plants beside him bent again. But this time, the steps were wrong. They landed sideways. Clumsy. Like whatever walked there didn't understand how the motion worked. Ben stopped. The bending stopped. We looked at each other. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "Yeah." The next step landed correctly, perfectly aligned beside him. Whatever it was had adjusted, learned. The forest creaked louder then, a long groaning sound like wood stretching after sleep. I suddenly felt the overwhelming urge to leave. "Let's head back," I said. Ben didn't argue. We turned around and began walking toward the trailhead, picking up speed. The invisible steps followed. More confident now. More precise. The plants didn't bend hesitantly anymore. They flattened with the same weight as a person walking. Step, step, step. Eventually the forest thinned. The dirt trail widened. We could see pale daylight through the trees ahead. The parking area. Ben exhaled shakily. Almost out. The last stretch of grass beside the trail bent again, right in rhythm with us. But now, it was slightly ahead, just a little, like whoever walked there had begun setting the pace. We stepped out of the forest into the gravel lot. The grass ended at the edge of the trees. Nothing bent beside us anymore. The silence felt enormous. Ben laughed nervously. Well, that was. He stopped. We both looked back. The forest edge stood perfectly still. The grass didn't move. No bending. No invisible footsteps. Nothing. Guess it stayed, Ben said. We loaded our packs into the truck and started the drive home just before dusk. The road wound through long stretches of rural land, open fields replacing the dense woods. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then Ben said quietly, "You ever get the feeling someone's walking next to you?" I looked out the window. The roadside grass rippled gently in the wind, except for one thin line running alongside the road. A narrow path where the grass bent down in slow, steady steps, keeping perfect pace with the truck. Step, step, step. I watched it continue for nearly a mile. Then the grass stopped moving. But when we reached the next red light and the truck rolled to a stop, I heard it, a soft step on asphalt, right beside my door.